Hey guys, what's up again? Welcome to another Monday analysis. Today we have a very great topic. We're going to be talking about IMF, International Monetary Fund. So I've been doing a little bit of videos regarding these global or international institutions, which actually, provide some either economic support or something support to African countries. And I want to go into how they can actually harm the economy. So today we're going to be talking about IMF. And if you don't know, IMF is International Monetary Fund, is basically institutions that operate like a bank, which is supposed to give debt or loans or credit to African country or developing country worldwide. So, for you to understand what is IMF, I want to give you a little bit of a story, which is about Kenya. So right now, Kenya, 2023, they have a big problem with the budget, right? The country is about to default to their debt. So the reason why I want to give Kenya is I'm going to show you how these institutions can actually have bad or negative impact on the countries by forcing them into debt, right? So Kenya right now, their debt to GDP is almost 120%. It's actually above 100%, right? So the country has gone into debt whereby it has to actually borrow to pay the debt. You know what I mean? So if you live in America, you understand how the credit card works. So you have one credit card and two credit cards, right? So you take one credit card, you pay the one credit card, another one. You take the other one, then you pay another one. So that's what Kenya is doing right now. So let's say you have $100. Let's say that Kenya collects taxes of $100. So now they're spending about 80%, which is $80, to pay the debt. The country only has 20% to actually finance the rest of the operations, which include paying the salaries, paying the financing the infrastructures and financing education, healthcare, all that stuff, with just 20% of their revenue. So the reason why I'm saying that is I want to show you how these debts can actually have really, really bad impact on economies moving forward. So another example is Ghana. Ghana just recently got a bailout from the IMF. I like put it on here about it, but it's actually happened last week in May 2023. So whereby the government needed the bailout for $3.2 billion, and actually they received it, but the cost for that money usually is really, really big. So sometimes they can be something like privatizations, where the country has to sell their assets to actually multinational companies, or even open up the market to the international corporation to come in and actually make money. So there's a trade-off in terms of all this money you get for the IMF. So introduction, what is IMF actually? IMF, as I say, is an international monetary fund. Is headquartered in the United States. Its goal or its role is to finance, to give credit lines or financing to actually developing countries. They have a different type of credits. That's what you call emergency credits, which are supposed to help the country if they have emergency problems like hurricanes or they're about to default. And then they have like medium terms loans. This is usually about 30 months, 36 months loans, and that's supposed to help the country restructure their own economy to get back, to get back in a good order. So that, and the other one is long-term financing. This is about basically financing long-term projects. We just can include like infrastructure project and other stuff like that. So now let's look into the impact of IMF can have on a country. So usually the IMF loans come with conditions. This condition can include something like privatizations, reduce government spending, and cut public jobs. So because the loans in nature, they're supposed to help the country recover from economic problems or economic instability. So they usually come with a condition that IMF called, IMF tell you to stabilize your economy. So for example, privatization, right? If you notice, or if you've been reading the news, you have realized that most of countries in Africa, they have been selling the airports, right? Most airports in Africa have been sold to international corporations, and then some other ones that have been sold to local corporations. The reason why this airport has been sold is usually come with IMF rules. When IMF gives you money, they will usually ask you to privatize most of the government assets, right? Because they say the more asset the government is running, the more money going to be wasting. So the asset need to be privatization. Mostly privatizations, because of this asset that's so big and they're worth a lot of money, they usually end up in the hands of U.S. corporation or European corporations. So, for example, in the case of Kenya, when the airline, I think Kenya was privatized, was sold, the airport was sold, half of the equity in the airport is sold, and also there's another country like I think is Ghana too. I think also some other countries. So usually the government assets are going to be sold to the international corporations to actually manage them. So the other rule is usually they ask the government to reduce spending. So the idea of the reducing spending is that if the government spends less money, that means government become more efficient, but at what cost? So if you go most countries in Africa, right now I'm actually in Tanzania, and one thing I've noticed is Tanzania collects a lot of taxes from its citizens, but the roads are not actually built. There's a lot of bad roads. So you can ask yourself, where does the money go? You know what I mean? So usually they cut the funding to like educations and healthcare and infrastructures, and this money goes back to finance the debt. So basically this money goes to pay back the debt. So these debts can actually put a pressure on the government to be able to execute on any social programs. So the other thing that we tell is cutting public jobs. So they will tell the government, for you to be able to get this money, you have to cut the public jobs. You have to fire some government employees. That's you're going to be saving money. But the money you're saving is not supposed to actually help the country. It's supposed to be saved to go back and pay this loan. So the money has to go back there. So most countries in Africa right now, they have debt burdens. They have a debt traps whereby they have to collect these revenues to go pay the debt, and then they have to borrow the next GDP, the next budget, and again, it's kind of the cycle keep going on, and it will never end. So now let's look into, the economic impact of this debt, right? So number one, IMF advocate for capitalist economies, right? So before they give you a debt, you have to promise few stuff, which can include something like privatizations, cutting government spending, and as well market liberations. Market liberation, I want you to pay attention to this thing. Market liberation is when they are forcing the country to open the market to the international competitions. This company are coming from the United States, whereby they have, number one, low interest rates when they're borrowing the money. So they have enough capital to compete with any local company which is providing any service. So a few years from the time the company entered the market, the local business are going to start getting out of business. They cannot compete because international company has more resources as well expertise, right? So one of the impacts is what you call freedom of dumping, right? So once they start integrating what you call market liberations, it gives international company the rights to dump their product. That will force your country to reduce the import tax, and then you're gonna start seeing a lot of product from United States, like clothing, food, electronics, all that stuff. They're gonna start coming in your country. So what's gonna happen is the local manufacturers who are producing the same stuff in your country, they're not gonna be able to compete, and the factory in Africa are gonna close. So what is the biggest actually consequence of this? People are going to lose job in their country, and the country is not going to be able to produce anything. I'm gonna give you an example of Nigeria. I saw this video one day about this Nigerian guy. I think it was a politician. He was saying how opening the market to the foreign companies, it killed Nigeria economy and the prospect of growing, to the point whereby Nigeria is spending almost $20 million every year importing toothpick. Nigeria is not even able to produce its own toothpick, because if you're trying to produce toothpick, the international company will bring in toothpick in your country way cheaper than you can produce, and then you're going to actually not be able to sustain your business. You know what I mean? So all these taxes they're removing from import kills local industries, and as well robs the jobs from local people, because this product that being manufactured in America and in Europe and Asia, whereby they're actually keeping people working there, but they want to bring them in your country. They're not going to bring no job. They're just going to import them in your country, and then the local manufacturer who's actually creating job is not going to be able to compete, and you're going to lose your job. So the other impact is high taxes. This again, I'm going to give an example of Kenya, right? And this one I'm going to give an example of Kenya is because since the new administration, I think the guy's name is Ruto, came in, the first thing he did was imposing a lot of different taxes on citizens, right? That's not by accident. It's not because the guy, he's greedy. He just has no options, right? He has this big of a debt, and they have to raise taxes to pay the debt. So what they're going to do is they're going to raise taxes on you. They're going to raise income tax. They're going to raise a VAT tax. They're going to raise a gas tax. They're going to raise any tax possible to be able to pay this debt. So at the end of the day, this is going to actually have a major effect on your cost of living going up. Everything you're buying is going to become very, very expensive. So the other thing is the debt burden, right? These countries end up in a cycle of debt. They cannot get out of debt. It's impossible to get out of it. You know what I mean? You take $2 billion loan from IMF. You're gonna collect some taxes. You're gonna pay $2 billion, but the next time you need a budget. So what you're gonna do? You're gonna go back and borrow more money, and you're gonna pay. You're gonna go back borrow more money. So you're gonna start borrowing your budget. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, is you will never get out of this debt, and your country will never have enough money to actually spend on infrastructures, educations, healthcare, and other actually social programs, right? So now let's look what is the social impact of this debt. What actually happens to you as a citizen when your government is taking this too much IMF debt? So number one, you're gonna see is the high cost of living. Living in a country is going to be very, very expensive, right? Because the local industry that dead, they cannot produce any product. There are not going to be no jobs. People have no money, and then the government going to increase the taxes on everything, any product, and then everything going to start becoming expensive. So you're going to notice every time you go, when I went to United States for a couple of years, when I come back to Africa, everything is expensive. You know what I mean? Number two, after this company kills your local industry, they're not going to keep the prices down. Now they have no competition. What they're going to do, they're going to raise the prices. It's classic capitalist model. For example, you go in United States. This is very popular with Amazon. Amazon, what they do is they go in an industry, they drop the price as down as possible. They even lose money for a few years, but they can afford it because they have so much money. They have many other businesses they're operating which is making money. So they're going to subsidize their business, drop the prices down. The competition is not going to be able to compete. They're going to get out of business. And the next thing they're going to do, they're going to raise the prices. And this is what this multinational corporation does in Africa. They come in Africa, put the prices down. The local businesses, they're going to get out of business, and they're going to raise the price back up again. So that's going to increase your cost of living and actually how you're going to survive in that country. So another thing is poor infrastructure. If you see your country has bad roads, they have bad, everything is bad. You know what I mean? There is no good infrastructure in your country. The problem is not your country. The country has no money. You know what I mean? They're spending 80% of their revenues, tax revenues on servicing the debt. And then they have only 20% to actually pay for the employees and finance the school, finance education, health, kind of stuff. So they don't have no money to build no trainway, a railroad or road or whatever, or a port. They don't have no money. You know what I mean? Because this debt, they're too heavy on these little countries. And IMF knows that. And the whole reason why they give you debt is to put you in that trap that they can force you to open your market, and they're going to bring a multinational corporation to dump the product in your market, and you will not be able to develop. You're going to just become import-dependent countries. So the other thing is, you're going to see a lot of lack of funding of educations. You're going to start see your country start saying, oh, we don't want to fund education. There's university to find a way to fund themselves. We don't have enough money because there's no money, and also the IMF will want to force them to cut spending on those programs. It's a part of the condition of the loans you get from IMF. You're gonna force you to cut spending on a program like education and healthcare. What they need is they want you to not subsidize your education, to not subsidize your healthcare. Then the pharmaceutical company from the United States, they're gonna come back in your country and start dumping medicine. They're gonna start making money off your citizens because the government is not subsidizing anything in education or healthcare. So the other thing which can be a little bit controversial is LGBTQ agenda. As soon as you get the money from IMF, what's going to happen is the next thing you're going to see your country start debating if LGBTQ is actually good or bad. I don't know where. You know what I mean? You never seen your country, nobody you have ever heard talk about LGBTQ agenda. But as soon as your country start getting IMF or they're applying for IMF money, you're gonna start seeing your parliament start debating if LGBTQ is good. This is a perfect example of Ghana. Ghana, when he was looking for money, the president was talking about how LGBTQ is not a bad thing, but the parliament has to discuss about it. So he basically opened a framework to talk about these issues, which is not really in any beneficial of any citizens. The same thing happened in Kenya. As soon as you see your country start talking about LGBTQ agenda, that means they're actually looking for money from IMF. It's really no, it's not a rocket science. You know what I mean? So this is the agenda which come with this money from IMF. So now let's talk about the solution. What can be the solution for Africa to actually get away from IMF? You know what I mean? It's really hard because most Africa, they're already in debt with IMF. They already have billions and billions. They will never pay the money. The only thing they can do is borrow the money, pay it, and borrow the next money because you got to have a budget every year. So one of the solutions which was proposed before was IDB, Africa Development Bank. Africa Development Bank was supposed to be IMF of Africa, was supposed to finance Africa itself, Africa infrastructure, Africa education, healthcare, development. But I think, it got hijacked by the French and Americans and Indians and Japan's. If you go on IDB or Africa Development Bank website and look for the shareholders, you will find a lot of shareholders which are non-African. You're gonna find the French people have shares in IDB. You're gonna find UK. You're gonna find America. You're gonna find Japan. These people, they're already controlling the bank. It's supposed to be the bank's supposed to be competing with the institutions, but now you bring them on board, which means you're not going to be able to finance anything because now this guy, they can vote on whatever you can do, and they're not going to let you get away from their system because they're making money from you. So the solution is IDB need to be independent, and any member country of IDB need to actually deposit some of their reserve, maybe 20-25% in the IDB, and then those reserves need to be used to finance the infrastructure project or other project the countries may need. You know what I mean? So that was one of the best solutions, but it got hijacked. So right now what we're gonna do is make it independent again, remove the foreign power in IDB, Africa Development Bank, and that's where institute that every member need to have some deposit in IDBs. Then we can have enough funding to actually loan out for African countries. So the other solution is gold standard. This was an idea which was brought by Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi got killed off this idea. The idea was Africa should create a currency, the currency which is backed by gold. And Africa has a massive amount of gold, which means they can really print any amount of money they want and back it with gold. Doesn't matter how much money you print, as long as you have enough gold to reserve them, you're going to be able to, the currency is not going to be able to have inflation. So if you look, as an example for in Congo, you have about 430 tons of gold. Tanzania, Uganda just found about $1 trillion worth of gold. And then there's a gold in Tanzania. There's a gold in Ghana. Ghana is Gold Coast. It has massive, really the biggest gold reserve on the planet. And then you have South Africa. All these countries, they have massive gold. They can be able to issue a currency and back that currency with their own natural resources. You know what I mean? In that case, a country like Congo can borrow the money with the collateral of their own reserve. You know what I mean? So in that case, you don't have to go to IMF because Africa really has the real money. The real money is gold. The real money is not dollars. It's gold. So the one who have gold has the real money. So we need to have, it's a shame that's a lot of African leaders, they would take gold, which is the real currency, and go sell it for dollars, which is a paper currency. So you taking the real money and sell it for a fake money. You know what I mean? And that's why we need to move forward from there. We need to start using gold as the standard in Africa. You know what I mean? So that's the only way we can get off IMF, World Bank, and the other institutions that's actually enslaving Africa right now through debt. So guys, thank you again for being with me today. I hope I gave you some value on this topic of IMF. And if you like the video, make sure to subscribe and hit the like. And actually click the link to join my Telegram channel right now, so you know when I'm releasing a video and you know when the next thing is coming up. So we're gonna be talking a lot of amazing topics. And the next week we're gonna start talking about the how to make money in Africa. We are doing a lot of researches right now, and we're gonna start a podcast very soon. So make sure you stay tuned.